to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. And we will now, Jenna, I will turn it over to you to go through the housekeeping and our attendance components.
Yes.
It's slightly different. Yep.
Okay, thank you so much. And I appreciate everyone's patience. We are not sure what happened with the links, but we have gotten it. It looks like we're good now. Also, I just wanted to make everyone aware, we do have a notice near the beginning of the presentation that these webinars are being recorded so that they can be made available afterward, similar to the audio recording we normally take during an in-person meeting. Andy, next slide. Okay, so for general housekeeping for the webinar, please keep in mind that public comments and questions, you have a couple of different options. We did not receive any in advance of the meeting. So if we receive any during the meeting, your options are to use the chat function. As you can see, there are icons at the top. You can use the little comment bubble. You can show the conversation and then you can add to the chat. You can also, if you want, email Maria, our meeting administrator, during the meeting and she can read it aloud, or you can unmute yourself and let us know that you'd like to provide public comment. Public comments will be kept to 3 minutes. However, there are multiple options for you to do that, and let us know if you have any questions. Next slide, Andy. Okay, and then for committee discussion, in particular, I wanted to note that though the same thing applies for committee members, it is preferred that you, if at all possible, provide your comments verbally so that we have it on the audio portion of the recording. However, we certainly will read your comments aloud if necessary. Next slide. Okay, so thankfully, we have Dan Tran with OCIT, who is listening in today and has been helping us move everybody over. We're using Microsoft Teams today. We've produced a guidance memo that was available on the participate page of our website. We will keep that there for all future meetings where we are using this platform. If you have questions in the interim, please reach out to staff. I think what we will do prior to the next meeting is coordinate with a couple of folks to do a trial run. Unfortunately, we won't know until the meeting starts if we have some of these issues because we've done trials and they go fine. So what we'll need to do is maybe start the meeting early with a couple of test folks and make sure that it's working the day of. So we'll do that next time. Next slide. Okay, we'll go on to the rest of the calendar. I will note that if anyone has any continuing IT issues associated with the webinar, Dan is, as I said, Dan Tran is you can put a comment in and he will respond. And we will also, behind the scenes as staff, try to help you as best we can. Okay, thank you. Back to you, Debbie.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. And all right, so we are going to go ahead and have the members announced. And so if you could unmute yourself and just acknowledge that you are here, that would be fantastic. Just to affirm that.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and do the roll call. So when I call your name, please affirm presence. If you are sitting in as an alternate, please reply when the name of the primary committee member is read by stating your name and the name of the committee member you are sitting in as alternate. Thank you. So I will begin. Debbie Neef.
Present.
Tiffany Ackley. Sandra.
Present.
Bill. Megan U. Schneider, Mike Frost,
Present.
Lisa Bartlett, Kay Havens,
Present.
Brad McGeer,
Brendan Dugan in for Brad McGurr.
Karen McLaughlin,
I'm here.
Eve Knobloch, Sue Kemp,
Here.
Derek Reeve,
Norris Grant in for Derek Reeve.
Dave Wheeler,
Here.
Doug Erdman,
Present.
Carol Moore, Rick Erkneth, Trish Kelly,
Maria, in the comments, Betty Burnett said she'll be representing SOCWA today.
okay, Ed Mandic,
I'm here.
Nikki Morzetti, and Sergio Farias. Okay, and those are all the members. Thank you.
Okay.
And sorry,
I'm not sure if-
also Brendan Dugan said he is signing in for Brad McGeer for Rancho Santa Margarita.
I didn't hear my name called. This is Bill Moorhead. I'm present.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Are there any other committee members that did not hear their name? Okay. All right, I would like to ask everyone to mute themselves unless they are speaking, getting a little background noise. Thank you, everybody. Okay, as far as public introductions, when we are live, we go around the room and have those introductions. What we will do is, I just want to let the public know that all the introductions are documented through the attendance in the webinar. If you are attending by phone, you may email the administrator, Maria, and at maria.tamez, Tamez, at ocpw.ocgov.com to add your name in the chat. You can do that as well. So with that, we will move on to the next item. If there are any public comments that on any item that is not on the agenda, please raise your hand. And I see Mike Beenan has raised his hand. Mike, I'll recognize you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mike Beenan, Laguna Bluebelt Coalition. I want to begin by thanking Molten Miguel Water District, the county, and our many inland city partners in working with the Laguna Bluebelt Coalition to reduce Aliso Creek flows by 47%. This helps restore the proper creek flows for the Aliso Restoration Project, which can be flooded from too much water or dry up from not enough water. So we're trying to get the creek back to its proper flow, and this has been a monumental effort that spanned many decades, so thanks to all. We also are going to need some help this summer because there's going to be a lot of people coming to Aliso Beach, and we want them to come. So we're asking all MS4 co-permittees to help us with enforcement and protect the Aliso Beach sand berm. The sand berm operates as a natural dam to hold back the ponding water and slowly filter it over many hours through the berm to provide safe, healthy ocean water. So once again, this has been a terrific step in the right direction to get the creek flows down. And if we can protect the berm as we did in 2018, we'll have a better summer. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, and that was a great effort back then, and thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else that would like to speak from the public? I'm just going to scroll through and see if I see any other hands. And Mike, you could put your hand down unless you have more to say. But I don't see any other public comments, so we will move on to the approval of the minutes. I will ask for a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. This is Ed Mandich.
Thank you, Ed. Do I have a second? Okay. I see Bill Moorhead seconding it.
Yes.
Thank you, Bill. Yes. Okay, and the way we will do this, if there are any opposed, raise your hands. Otherwise, we will assume unanimous approval. Okay, and I don't see any hands raised. Fantastic. So, okay, so now we're on to item number 4, which is a very exciting event. We have the election of the new chair and vice chair. My tenure is ending as of July 1st. And we had an ad hoc committee and met, and very, very happy to report out on our nominations. But first, for those of you who are new, I just want to remind everyone that the way it works, the chair and vice chair, those are for 2 years, and we rotate back between cities and agencies or districts. And so, with me representing Laguna Beach County Water District, the next chair will be from a city, and the nominating committee has nominated Tiffany Ackley as the new chair, City of Aliso Viejo, and for vice chair, Kay Havens from El Toro Water District for vice chair. So very happy to announce that, and I need to call for a vote on that, or if there.
I'll move. This is Sandra Jacobs. I'll move the recommendation of the nominating committee.
So this is Betty Burnett. I'll second that.
Thank you, Sandra and Betty. Okay, and again, as before, we will assume a unanimous approval unless anyone raises their hand in objection. Fantastic. So congratulations to Tiffany and Kay, and welcome. So now we will move to item number 5, which is a presentation by Jenna of the benefits of the watershed level coordination in Aliso Creek. This was I'm very excited to have them present this. We did a lot of work, and the committees met, subcommittees met for several, over, many, many months. So I'll let you take it away, Jenna and Jennifer.
Thank you. And also, we're going to tag team this. So for those of you who don't know me, Jenna Voss with the County of Orange, my colleague Jennifer Shook will be joining me in the presentation. I apologize in advance. I have a little less of a voice today, so hopefully everyone can hear me. Next slide, please. Thank you. And thanks to Andy, who's controlling the slides today. So every time we're saying next, it's Andy on the other end. Okay. So after the discussion at the last meeting in March, we thought it would be especially apropos and wise to provide a background, especially for the executive committee members who are fairly new, to provide a little bit of a background on the regional project planning framework, which has a line item in our budget, of course, and for right now is focused on the Aliso Creek watershed. And I wanted to take a little bit of a step back and go back to the primary reason for the group, which is to ultimately provide support for more project implementation that meets the goals and intent of the IRWM plan. So for those of you who are new to IRWM, I'm going to walk through a little bit of that background. However, that process to provide support for more project implementation will be done as a collaborative process with stakeholders from throughout the watershed. Next slide.
Andy, we need the next slide.
It is on the next slide, so I'll.
Oh.
I think, do I have to stop sharing and then reshare?
Oh,
Is that
okay.
what we're? Sorry about that, everyone.
Okay.
Just back up and then share.
I'll start talking while he works on that.
Okay.
So the impetus for the group, as I said, is first and foremost to the concept and practice of IRWM. Integrated Regional Water Management is a state program that I'll talk about in a minute, but that is our primary driver as a group. The reason we're all together today is as the decision-making body for a group that represents an IRWM plan. And that's a really important distinction. The other is because of the strategic visioning process. We talked about that at the last meeting somewhat. This was something that the executive committee in 2015 initiated so that we could establish regional planning goals over a long time frame. That resulted in some specific goals for the IRWM group, as well as some things that went into our last IRWM plan update. The third is a holistic and shared approach to watershed management challenges. This was something that was really came out of the strategic visioning, certainly, but has also been brought to the fore with a lot of existing planning taking place and the need for funding and taking advantage of shared opportunities where we can. And why on a watershed scale? And why ALISO first? The watershed scale is helpful for several reasons, but the primary one is that it allows more refined goal setting. We have goals for the whole region, for all of South Orange County. However, there are watershed-specific issues that we need to address. There are watershed-specific challenges that are making projects, in some cases, more difficult to implement. And so it was decided that a watershed-scale approach for engendering collaboration specifically to further projects should and could be done on a watershed scale. And we picked ALISO first for a few different reasons that I'll go into. Next slide. Okay, so the concept of IRWM, as I said, the IRWM program is a state program which seeks to manage all aspects of water resources in a designated region. IRWM crosses jurisdictional, watershed, political boundaries. It includes agencies, other stakeholders, individuals, nonprofits, a wide range of groups, and seeks to address issues that from in differing perspectives from all across a watershed scale, looking for mutually beneficial solutions. I have circled there in red the funding area number 6, which is San Diego. We are in the San Diego subregion. The IRWM program is driven in large part by bonds that have supported funding. Those are allocated to 12 different funding areas. We have 2 other recognized IRWM regions that we partner with in the San Diego funding area. So if you ever hear me reference the funding area, that is kind of the broader group we fall under. North and Central Orange County are in the Santa Ana funding area, which is number 5 on this map. Next slide. So that's the concept of IRWM. The practice of IRWM is not just limited to grant funding and the grant program. It is driven through collaboration and our governance. We are required through our IRWM plan to have identified a specific governance structure and to provide a framework for stakeholder engagement and involvement. The other primary driver for IRWM statewide is project planning. Next slide. And as I said, our primary responsibility as a region is to decide what our regional goals are for projects that provide the benefits that we see as necessary to provide for a more sustainable and resilient region. The IRWM plan was originally developed in 2006, has been updated 2 subsequent times. Our current plan was updated and reapproved in 2018. These are our existing plan goals, for which there are measurable objectives and strategies, all of which drive the way we rank projects when we do have grant funding to support projects through our IRWM grant. And we will have another grant round fairly soon. If you have any questions about this, please reach out to me. I won't read all of this, but the primary they're natural resources, water supply reliability and efficiency, flood risk management, and surface water quality. Next slide. So as I said, one of the other drivers was the Executive Committee strategic visioning. I included as an attachment to the staff report the slides from the original presentation that the ad hoc gave, summarizing the results of that process. And if you can click next. The reason why I'm bringing this up for this is because one of the kind of the directives resulting from that was to foster regional projects to maximize water resources. A lot of that discussion resulted in how do we best develop and put forward regional projects that benefit the South Orange County. Next slide. And then again, why the focus on Aliso Creek? There were a lot of existing interested local stakeholders, municipalities. There was also a need to engage with state, federal, and other transportation agencies. We had the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had worked for 15 years on a feasibility study that at the end of which there was a recommendation made for the project that they felt should result. And it was to address the degradation of the lower 6 miles of the whole watershed. After that process, there were a lot of engaged stakeholders. We chose as locals not to move forward with the Army Corps' preferred option. So there was a bit of a vacuum there that needed to be addressed. There is also a need to protect valuable infrastructure along that Aliso Creek and enhance riparian and estuary habitat. And we also had an opportunity to establish open and transparent communication with some existing IRWM group stakeholders and through some of our outreach efforts for Team Arundo, which is our extensive permitting and removal plan that we have in place for Arundo Donax. Next slide. And this is where I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jennifer Shook.
Thank you, Jenna. I am Jennifer, and I manage OC Public Works Compensatory Mitigation Program. So I deal with mitigating impacts to the environment from our capital improvement and maintenance improvement projects. So the perspective I'm bringing today to talk about challenges and opportunities is based on my experience implementing our projects, coordinating with my colleagues in watersheds, working with my colleagues in infrastructure programs, OC Parks, and as well as just working closely with a lot of our regulators and bringing their perspective as well. Next slide, please. Are we frozen again? Oh, there we go. Okay, so local agencies and project proponents often have to navigate a very complex series of regulatory regulations, permit regulations. They constantly evolve, standards of practice change. What you're seeing on the slide right now is primarily what we would deal with for any kind of projects involving water resources or biological resources. If you're to bring in other elements, environmental factors such as air quality or projects that involve hazards or hazardous materials, you're going to bring in additional regulators, different permits, and as you can see in the light blue column, the local agencies, they've got a lot of different agencies they work with. As a permitted entity, they'll be issued a lot of permits to implement a project. But in addition to being regulated, they oftentimes are going to coordinate with stakeholders. So there may be an adjacent or downstream landowner that could be impacted by a project, or there could be opportunities for collaborative projects with transportation agencies. We want to make sure that we're listening to the stakeholders and bringing them into the conversation so that, you know, we're not looking over an opportunity or a challenge that can be addressed early on. Next slide, please. And then land use planning is also a big issue, coming from trying to look for spots to do restoration, seeing the regional housing needs assessment. So as part of the state law enacted in 1980 with the need for regions to assess their needs for additional housing units, the most recent cycle, sixth cycle that was recently adopted this spring, I believe, for October 2021 through October 2029, indicates that we'll need over 183,000 housing units in Orange County. While some of these may be infill development, some of these would likely be new development. So as part of that, we've got to build out our infrastructure. That might be new roads, improving the level of service on roads, but then also having our flood control infrastructure be able to address the additional runoff from these projects that are being built out. Next slide, please. This additional infrastructure can also put a higher need on providing water supply, and a challenge can be water supply reliability. In South Orange County, a lot of the water supply is from recycled water. So there's a challenge of trying to balance where the water's coming from, making sure there's enough to recharge the aquifer, but then also addressing the water source to recycle. So if it's coming through to a creek and you're trying to collect off of a creek, sometimes there might be stormwater infrastructure that's also looking to collect the water and treat it to address water quality issues. Next slide, please. So speaking of water quality, surface water quality can be a challenge trying to balance hydromodification, which occurs during wet weather and sloughs off the creek. We've got unnatural water balance, which might be additional water that doesn't belong in the system during dry weather. Mike had mentioned that earlier during the public comment about having that balance in the creek. So that's what we're looking to do, is make sure there's that balance. There's water quality issues like TMDLs. One of the easiest ways to comply with the TMDL is oftentimes to capture the water, or, we do diversion. And so then there's that challenge of trying to meet different permit requirements. So you've got to comply with the TMDL, but then we might have a lake and stream bed alteration agreement to protect wildlife habitat that may be downstream from that diversion. So there's a challenge to balance that. So looking at the habitat needs, balancing native versus non-native resources and habitats, such as Jenna mentioned, Team Norundo. So making sure that they can get in and do those projects, but then there's still the native habitat that's protected. And then also climate change adaptation, being able to adjust to additional drought conditions. We might see more extreme drought events. Having to address water conservation. We've seen a lot less water make it into the creeks in some areas of the county just from additional water conservation. Next slide, please. But we recognize that there's a lot of opportunities that we can implement to overcome these challenges. And one of them is having some collaborative planning project planning structures in place. For the County of Orange with our flood control projects, these are most often run through the City Engineers Flood Control Advisory Committee, or CEFCEC. So these will, they prioritize regional flood projects on a regional need. And then we also work with OCTA on balancing our road development, looking at regional need for roads. And so we are doing that on a collaborative basis. Next slide, please. And then, as Jenna said, we recognize that there's a lot of structures already in place. So we want to leverage these relationships and projects that are ongoing. As I said, my program, I often work with my colleagues in stormwater. So we recognize that there could be synergies and projects that could come out of doing habitat projects and maybe some in-treatment or in-stream treatment with biocontrol projects, or biotreatment, excuse me. There's a lot of relationships that we've built with our regulators, so we are trying to get them involved to get their feedback on projects. And then there's opportunities to leverage our partnerships and maybe find funding opportunities. So bringing together different parties, if someone knows that there might be funding for one project, we can partner them with somebody else who might have additional capital and want to add maybe a secondary benefit to their project. Next slide, please. And we've discovered that early engagement is possible. We're, like I said in the previous slide, just taking advantage of these relationships. We know that there exist, the groups, we've got watershed groups, we've got, CEFCEC, and, working with OCTA even on wildlife issues. So taking advantage of that, really getting our regulatory agencies involved early so we can help develop, or they can help us develop projects that are permittable and implementable and viable. So that way we're not spending a lot of time in the project development phase just to go get that permit and then have them deny the permit. And then just being able to address different overlapping regulatory drivers if possible. So trying to meet multiple needs and maybe build bigger projects that can address multi-resources. So we're only having to go out and mobilize once to a project and get that economies of scale on larger projects. And I will end my part with a great African proverb that Jenna shared with me that says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jenna.
All right, next slide, Andy. Actually, you can go 2 forward. Okay, so now we'll go back. We'll go specifically to Aliso Creek. We wanted to give a little bit more of the background as to why the group was formed in the first place. And the process to support regional projects in Aliso Creek was initially focused on what projects are there out there currently. In order to assess what we need to accomplish, we also need to know what's currently underway. So Andy, you can click, I think 4 times. There's animation. I apologize for that. I should not have done that. I won't do that next time. We took a stepwise process first to collect and categorize projects in accordance with those IRWM plan goals. And then we're seeking to identify barriers to why some of those projects, the majority of which were in some form of planning or conceptual stage, why they weren't moving forward. And so we wanted to bring the group together to initiate conversation around that. Next slide. We also have engaged stakeholders with a vested interest in the watershed, as we've said. It's a broad coalition, as you can see there. We have usually about 50 attendees with over 30 groups represented. Next slide. And this is kind of a manifestation, a cartoon manifestation of what we have in a meeting typically. What we wanted to show here is that it has been a great process of bringing together folks who might not ordinarily communicate on a regular basis, specifically on what some of the desired outcomes or goals for a watershed project might be. Next slide. So one of the key things that we've done as a group was establish desired outcomes. So there was a facilitated discussion to develop a consensus around what particular goals, what we call desired outcomes for the watershed would be, and then projects would need to be brought forward to meet those needs. So meeting attendees were asked to express the desired outcomes for the watershed, and we were seeking to define SMART goals, which are measurable goals to drive project development. The 5 desired outcome categories that came out of the discussion are on the screen there that you can see. I wanted to note here that this was an informal process used with sticky notes. We worked around the room, and oftentimes turned out that folks were writing almost identical statements. And so it was pretty easy to categorize into these 5 main category groups. And this was something that I think is a major takeaway for such a robust and diverse group. Next slide. Some of the other notable accomplishments. So when we say it's easy to talk about this process as a concept, however, it's really the accomplishments of the group are really in kind of the nitty-gritty day-to-day. We've produced a website where the materials are posted online for stakeholders. We have an Esri-based project map that we showed on an earlier slide. That can be used to look for geographic proximity to existing projects, where partners might exist, where we might need a project, where there may not be any projects, but there isn't a need. We have a watershed scale reference guide. When we met 4 times, and after the second meeting, it was asked that before we start talking about projects, we provide a comprehensive overview of the current state of the watershed. So we took a little bit of a step back, and we provided a comprehensive overview that we then translated into a reference guide. It is fairly robust, and all of the data that was provided, and then some, based on feedback we received from other stakeholders, is all compiled in that guide, which is available on the website. We're hoping to use it as a tool to put forward projects in a programmatic way for permitting and funding. The next steps, we'll have 2 more meetings during the next couple months. Meeting 5, we're going to be holding in late May, meeting 6 in late June. We'll start to talk about an alternative analysis for the lower 6 miles, a replacement, potential replacement for that core project I mentioned earlier. That will take a lot of stakeholder coordination to make sure that we're putting forward project ideas that can come to fruition and have acceptance. Then we'll also finalize that reference guide, meaning if there's anything additional we need to add at this time, we will. We're also going to consider potential streamlining in our project programmatic permitting opportunities by type. So, for example, is there a way that we can potentially look at all the capture projects, stormwater capture projects throughout the watershed and seek funding? Next slide. I think, and that's what we have for you today. And I'll hand it back over to you, Debbie.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. It was just, and I have to say, participating in this effort, it was such a joy to see the collaboration with so many different agencies and different stakeholders, and work together to work toward these shared goals. So I think it's fantastic. I look forward to seeing the next steps. So with that, item 5, Jenna, you better take a drink because you're up again.
Could I ask a quick question, Madam Chair? This is Sandra.
Of course, Sandra.
Just real quickly. So ultimately, will those desired outcomes as a result of the Aliso Creek collaboration coincide with and blend into the visioning committee goals for the IRWM of water reliability, quality, flood control, and natural resources? And if not, how do you blend those together? Thank you.
That's a great question. Andy, if you can go back to the slide that shows the desired outcomes. So the desired outcomes for Aliso really are kind of derivative of those overarching goals. So they all are very much related to that. Improved public recreation and awareness is kind of a combination. We have public education under the strategies for each of our goal categories. So they all fall within the goals. They just are more specific. Any other questions?
Is that going to help or hinder the projects? Because if you can't, especially the public recreation, it's kind of outside of, that's the first thing that stuck out to me. I won't belabor the point, but it's a great presentation. It's a lot of detail. My God, I don't know how you made it through those meetings. So we want to learn from that if we're going to do this in another watershed as well, down closer to where Santa Margarita is. So thank you for giving me the time.
I just want to respond to that last bit. And Andy, you can go ahead and get to the next set of slides unless there are any other questions or comments. In terms of the specificity, the desired outcomes are really intended to be an overarching guide for us specifically for Aliso. When projects come forward for funding through IRWM, they will absolutely need to fall within those categories and be able to explain their metrics within those categories. So there wouldn't be a project to come forward on a regional basis that wouldn't ultimately meet the IRWM goals. That is the final and primary screen.
Thank you for that clarification, Jenna. Yes, we did talk about that as well. We are going to now, Jenna introduced our 21-23 to 23 budget last meeting. And now hopefully you've all had a chance to digest that a little bit. And she will go over now some of the key points because this meeting now we are up to approve the budget. So I'll turn that. Oh, wait a minute. Before that, I see Betty Burnett's hand. Sorry, Betty, I'm trying to go toggle back and forth here. Betty, you have the floor.
We don't have to spend a lot of time on this because I know, and I agree. I think that it's wonderful to see this presentation and this nice summary of all the work that was done on Aliso and understand how it is working to try to prepare projects that can come together and potentially be a part of IRWM, or maybe not be a part of the IRWM, but still be great watershed goals in terms of funding, just focusing on funding alone. But my question is it what I was wondering whether Jenna had an example of that, of a project that someone in the group or the stakeholders has said they believe they will bring forward out of this process for potential IRWM or maybe even other kinds of grant funding in that lower Aliso Creek area. I don't know. Just wondered if there was a specific, if there was something specific as a project example. We would be interested in that.
Thank you, Betty. Jenna?
The first and foremost, the lower 6 miles, we've been talking about this for the better part of 2 decades, the need for a project in that area. So that is one of our focus areas. And we are bringing forward at the next meeting a potential alternative approach to the core process. Many of the comments on the core process focused on how much earth needed to move and the overall project footprint. So we're bringing forward a potential alternative approach to that because that is one of our primary drivers in that group is the lower 6 miles. That's one example.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and I really hope that the groundwork that's been laid in this will help to facilitate a discussion about best alternatives for that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Okay, let me just, I see Mike Beenan has his hand raised as well. Mike, I'll recognize you.
Thank you. First, I omitted to thank you, Debbie, for supporting the 35 new bottle refill stations in Laguna Beach. That'll really help reduce plastic pollution this summer. So thank you very much, Debbie, for your leadership on that. And I want to remind the group that, our watershed is very unique because we're a coastal area and our footprint really extends out into the ocean. We currently discharge 10 million gallons a day, about 1.5 miles offshore. And this could be repackaged as an unallocated public resource to bring in more recycled water. One of the benefits we can do for the lower reach of the canyon is to reestablish the vegetation. As we walk through that area, we can see it's a lot of grass. It was all denuded for ranching. And ranching, of course, has really hard impact on the environment. So bringing in recycled water to that area would help restore the vegetation. It would also help prepare us for wildfires. We're at 30% of our rainfall this year. And even though wildfires seem to be focused on the wilderness areas in our region, we all breathe the smoke. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to work together to actually bring in more recycled water to both prevent and then suppress wildfires in the area. So I'll be looking to partner with folks to make that happen. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, and let me just scan very quickly, make sure that I haven't missed. Oh, Steve Deshawn, I see your hand is raised. Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. The average flow into the coastal plant is about 2.8 million gallons, and of that 2.8 million gallons, a pretty substantial portion of it is converted to recycled water. So I just want to clarify about the 10 million gallons that's going into the ocean outfall, because it's significantly less than that.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, Steve, I heard that comment too from Mike, but I took the comment from Mike to include the urban flows that Aliso Creek's flowing pretty heavy right now with urban flow. So that's how I interpreted Mike's comment.
Yeah. However, I would note as well, it is far below 10 million gallons. The discharge at the mouth is significantly less than that from the urban flows. We're down in the low single digits.
Okay, that's good to know, Amanda. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay. All right.
If I could clarify just for a second, I was referring to the Aliso Creek ocean outfall. The Aliso Creek itself is running about 2.5 million gallons a day, according to monitoring, and that's equivalent to 4 Olympic swimming pools. So keeping the berm up is really important to embay that water. When it's dug out illegally, it releases all that water directly in the ocean. And that goes to Sandra's earlier point about the importance of recreation. Aliso Creek determines the health of the water, not only at Aliso Beach, but probably up and down the Laguna Beach coastline. Since we know that these discharges don't magically go away. So once again, I was referring to the Aliso Creek ocean outfall, which I believe is around 10 million gallons a day or close to 500 million gallons a year, as an unallocated public resource. So sorry about the confusion.
Thanks, Mike. Okay. Okay. I'm just going to scan. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised, so we will move on to item 6 now, and the budget. Jenna, you have the floor.
Okay, next slide, Andy. So I went through these slides at the last meeting, so I won't spend a lot of time on them. There was also a lot of description in the agenda staff report for each of the items that are included as line items in the budget. However, I did want to just have a reminder on the budget approval process, especially for some of our newer folks, new members to the committee. Our budget is proposed and approved on a biennial basis. However, it does comprise 2 annual budgets. So you're effectively right now approving budgets for 2 fiscal year cycles. The total budget is divided equally amongst the 22 member agencies. Any portion of the budget not expended in a fiscal year is refunded to each of the member agencies on the next invoice. So, for example, any of the funds not spent this year would be refunded to each of the member agencies through a reduction in the invoice that we would process for the next fiscal year. Next slide. Okay, so as I said, last meeting I walked through each of these. I'm going to do that in an abbreviated way now. The first broad category are in support of Proposition 1 IRWM grants. That also includes some plan updates and stakeholder support. This is one of our primary functions in terms of maintaining our plan and supporting grant applications. We expect round 2, so this is really important. Call for projects and plan list management. We are required through our IRWM plan to manage our project list. It needs to be a prioritized list that is maintained in a public setting. We also are required to, via Senate Bill 985, to maintain a robust and prioritized project list associated with a stormwater resource plan, which I can proudly say was received reconcurrence from the State Water Resource Control Board on Tuesday. And that includes, both of those include some consultant and county support. Next. Grant administration. This is funded through the grants that we receive and is provided through county support, i.e. it is not cost shared. Data management. This is, we are required through our IRWM plan to make available the information associated with all of our projects and to maintain information available to the public. We have a website that serves as our data management system, and we collect and have available there all of our project-based information. Next slide. I do have some notes I've added here since our last meeting. We had some discussion surrounding committee support, in particular for initiation of another follow-on strategic visioning process. akin to the one I mentioned for 2015 and 2016. I added some clarification to the written report that you all received. We do have some additional funds or funds that will otherwise likely go unspent in this fiscal year for committee support, as we didn't hold 2 meetings in 2020. So we will have some cost savings there. That can be used to initiate the strategic visioning, as long as we have some efforts begin before the end of the fiscal year. So that's June 30th. We also have the option of providing additional support through the next fiscal year, drawn from either this item, which is line items 5 and 13, if you are looking at the spreadsheet. And if we have a delay from the Department of Water Resources, we could also potentially pull from item number 1. Staff, we were asked to find a way to support an ad hoc that wouldn't result in an increase to the budget. And so this is what we were proposing. It doesn't actually modify this budget line item at all. I just wanted to make clear that we should have a mechanism to support an ad hoc. Next slide. I've also added some clarification for the regional project development and stakeholder framework. We just gave a presentation on this. Also, I clarified based on split between the 2 fiscal years, what we seek to accomplish. Again, it would be some staff support for the group meetings. We would also seek to develop a report out for the executive committee and the IRWM group at least twice a year. We would engage on project options for Aliso Creek, as Betty requested. The primary example for that is right now the lower 6 miles. However, there are some other project concepts that have come forward from throughout the watershed. So we'll be working through that. Establish best practices to support and foster those projects and help find funding. Also, it was pointed out, and was a good point to make, that some of these projects might not be interested in going for IRWM grant funding, but that doesn't mean that they won't be a great fit for other types of funding programs and still definitely support the IRWM goals. Next slide. And also, I wanted to point out one of the key things that Jennifer and I wanted to touch on is that we have had ongoing conversations with our colleagues in the regulatory agencies, and many thanks to Jennifer for helping to connect us with several folks in CDFW, California Department of Fish and Wildlife. One of the key things that we'll be seeking to do over this next 2-year span is to continue building on those relationships. We have made major headway in having them participate in discussions about projects, and our goal is to engage them early on so that we don't have project delays later in the process, and to continue building toward potential streamlining. For the second year, I wanted to clarify that any process we put forward for San Juan Creek, which was the next watershed that I was asked to consider for a similar process, would meet the needs of that particular watershed and would not be a mirror image of what we've done in Aliso Creek. It has to fit the need of that watershed and the stakeholder coalition associated with it, as well as the drivers that are unique to the watershed. Next slide. And then Roundtable of Regions is a statewide coalition of IRWM regions throughout the state. Staff attends, and that oftentimes is the way we find out information from DWR, as well as funding issues and opportunities. That's our main connection to the way IRWM is managed throughout the state. Team Arundel, as I alluded to earlier, we as the county, as administrators for the program, we hold all of the permits for Arundel removal throughout South Orange County. Many projects have utilized these permits over the years, and we already have recently re-upped the permit for CDFW and have interested parties in using it. So that is a key element for our program. Next slide. So this is the breakdown over the 2 fiscal years. Our goal was to not increase the budget. So it was the same for both years, and very similar. It's the exact same as it was last year. This is We have it broken down by consultant services contribution from the county, which is not cost shared, and the staff time, which is provided in FTEs, as well as dollar amounts. So as I mentioned, this is divided amongst the 22 member agencies. So the per share is $11,250 for the first year. Next slide, Andy. And the same for the following year. As I mentioned at the last meeting, the key difference is that we anticipate more funding being needed in the immediate next year for grant support than we do in the following year, and then potentially some additional support in other areas for the second year. Next slide. So now I will open it to questions.
Yeah, so does anyone have any questions? I see Sandra has her hand raised. Sandra, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Sandra Jacobs, Santa Margarita Water District. I wanted to thank staff for really embracing the comments that we had back in March. It was important that to us that those were really clarified. And, you know, allowing funding for an update of that visioning, visioning ad hoc, I think is extremely important, because one of the purposes of that visioning committee way back when, and Jenna, you touched on it, was to look at projects that may not be available for grant funding, but may help and enhance our South County watersheds. So I appreciate you finding a niche for the visioning committee that our Chair Neves brought up, and I think it's still important to focus on that. And then lastly, I wanted to share with the executive committee that I have been in touch with the San Juan Basin Authority Board of Directors. I spoke at one of their meetings to give them an update on what may be happening in the 2022 fiscal year with regards to the county, and just to be able to focus our efforts and not duplicate an effort. And so I'm really looking forward to that collaboration as well as we start looking at San Juan Basin, and of course Santa Margarita Water District is overlies a portion of that basin, so it's important to me. And I just wanted to add those items. In general and in concept, I'm in support of the budget. And if Chair Neves, you are looking to entertain a motion, I will make that motion to approve this budget.
Thank you, Sandra. Yes, and I echo your comments as well. Thank you, Jenna, for some clarification that came up in March. Sandra has made a motion. Do I have a second? I'm scanning.
I can second it.
Okay, thank you, Betty, for a second. Any other discussion? Would anyone else like to comment or discuss? I'm looking for any additional hands.
I'm going to throw my hand up there, Debbie.
Okay.
You know,
okay.
For a lot of us,
yes, Kay, go ahead.
a lot of us haven't been through the strategic visioning process. What does that look like? How many meetings are we looking at? Will there be an outside facilitator? And what will be the makeup of the group, if we can kind of give people a vision, a picture of what that's going to look like? That might be helpful for people to serve. Thank you.
Yes, I was not on the visioning committee in the past. I know that Sandra Jacobs was, and it was essentially a group of 5 or 6, as I understand, that basically said, okay, where there are a lot of different stakeholders in this group, and we wanted to basically take a look at where, just sort of have a pause and say, where do we want to go? Where do we want to focus? And how do we want to then proceed? And so this isn't, the idea was not that it's a start over. This was basically to take the results of that visioning committee and to sort of dust it off and just have a sanity check. Does it need tweaking? Where are we going? Particularly in light of how it's looking now with regard to, there may not be in the future pure water related bonds out there. It is going to probably be more regionally, more climate resilience, and we're hearing a lot of these things. We want to see how that might impact and where we may be going, and make sure that we're still kind of on track to position ourselves to be in the best possible position to receive these grants. And Sandra, if you'd like to add anything else to that, you could certainly do that since you were in on the initial one.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Director Havens, and congratulations on your new position. We did not, the county facilitated, at least that's my recollection, Jenna. We had a couple of folks that are no longer with the county. They've retired and moved on. That's how long this has been. But Jenna and her capable hands has been a consistent presence there. I think we've gone through a couple of children with Jenna.
That's true.
Since we first knew her. So I think overall, Kay, it is it's to take the 30,000 foot look at what we're doing here, and making sure that the goals and objectives that we've put in place are still applicable today. We've gone through a significant drought over the last 5 or 6 years, and we may be moving in that direction again. Perhaps we need to change some of those goals, and keeping in mind that, you know, as water agencies, we're not part of the MS4 permits that the county is responsible for and the cities. But in this group, as the executive committee, you know, we're here to try and work together so that we can have projects that help everyone. And I'll use San Juan Basin, for example, trying to capture some of those storm flows so that we as a water district can reuse them, in addition to recycling a sanitary sewage as well. So we have a lot of common goals, and there are goals that we want to make sure we stay focused on. And I think you'd be a good addition to that as well. So I'll stop talking in lieu of the time. And if you have any other questions, just give me a call.
I appreciate the clarification, and I think it's good to clarify it, you know, to the entire committee so that people who we might be pulling in have an idea of what they're in for. And I think working with Jenna would be terrific. I think it's high time to do this. It's, you know, 5-6 years after, and the future certainly looks different from where we were 6 years ago. So did you already have a second on this?
Yes, Betty has seconded. Yes.
Good to go. Thank you for your time, and also Debbie, thank you for your time heading this committee. I think it's been a very interesting 2 years, and I hope that you have something fun planned for your time.
Well, it has been my pleasure. Thank you, Kay, and congratulations. Yes.
Debbie?
Yes.
One thing I wanted to clarify, Kay, you had asked about the structure. One plug for everyone on the executive committee. We will seek a balance between city representatives and water agencies, and that was a really helpful structure last time. Also, some of the content was driven by that group themselves. Where are the areas where they saw knowledge gaps that needed to be filled in order to make decisions? That was a key driver. So those are both things that I think would be helpful for folks to think about as we seek to initiate the process. Thank you.
Great. Absolutely. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you. So much. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor and a second, and I don't see any other hands raised or any further discussion. So again, I will then do the opposite. If there's anyone that opposes the budget, please raise your hand for recognition. And I don't see any, so motion carries. Thank you very much, Jenna, and thank you and your staff for all the hard work putting in all the details to this item. Thank you very much. And with that, we will move to item number 7, which are always, these are the most interesting components sometimes, and an update on some of the fantastic projects that have received grants. This afternoon, it's going to be an update on the OSO water recycling plant, the tertiary expansion, which was formerly the 3A plant. This was a recipient of the 2015 Prop 84 IRWM grant project, and we have Don Bunce from Santa Margarita Water District presenting. Don, you're up.
Oh, thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about our project. We're pretty proud of this, and it's been an evolution. We weren't expecting this, but it's been a fun road going down, and hopefully sharing some of the information with the group so you understand where we are and where we're going, and how this is going to end up benefiting the area, not just the watershed, but as it's evolving, some of the city of Mission Viejo's desires in the long term also. So if we can move to the next slide, please. A quick schedule of events here for today's presentation. I'll give you a little background on the project. Some of you folks may not have been associated to SOCMA at that time, so I'll give you a little background and what the purpose is for it, the revised project, how it's evolved, and then the schedule for completing this. So next slide, please. The purpose of the project and what we had submitted originally in the grant is to be able to recycle an additional 3,000 acre-feet of water and be able to use that within our system. The district has been a large proponent and user and supplier of recycled water ever since, almost since our inception as far as that goes. And going back into the mid-70s when the Oso Creek plant was originally built and to serve the needs of the then very new city of Mission Viejo. So want to expand that. And then the secondary benefit of this, water quality wise, is it's going to reduce the amount of flow to the or secondary effluent that goes out through the San Juan Creek Ocean outfall. So to Mr. Beenan's point earlier, this will be one of those projects that helps dry up those outfalls to improve the water quality that's going into the ocean and to utilize this resource to its highest ability right now. On the graphic on the picture shows our district within our various improvement districts that we have. And the vein type things that show on there. The purple is the areas that we currently serve recycled water to. And as you'll notice that we've been pretty successful in serving the majority of our district. The one glaring area that we'd like to increase recycled water and actually in this case, actually serve recycled water to is the city of Rancho Santa Margarita. Currently, there's no recycled water supply in that area. And we are moving forward, and our board actually just last night progressed the project to introduce the use of recycled water into Rancho Santa Margarita and hopefully in the not too distant future be able to supply that. This project will provide some of the water to that and some of our other growing needs that we have within the district. As you know, the ranch is an expanding area down in the East San Juan Capistrano area that is taking some of the recycled water. So we have increasing needs as we convert some of our infill on projects to increase recycled water. In addition to that, some of the water can also be used within the city of San Juan Capistrano's system. They currently purchase some recycled water when we have excess to be able to utilize for their non-domestic system within the city. And as most of you probably know, the annexation that's going to be taking place, we hope, here in the not too distant future, to increase the amount of recycled water that's used in the city of San Juan. This project alone will represent about 12% of our imported water. So if we're able to shift people from current use off of potable, we won't have to import it from Northern California or from the Colorado River. And as the district grows and we increase the number of residents and customers that we have, hopefully not have to tap into additional flows to be imported, but actually be able to offset those new demands with this recycled water use. Next slide, please. So originally the project, as I mentioned, was to be 3,000 acre feet. And we had originally thought that this was going to be at the 3A plant. At the time, the Santa Margarita was operating that plant for both ourselves and Molten Miguel. And we saw some capabilities and ability to locate some new tertiary facilities within that location, as well as disinfection. For a variety of reasons, it turned out that that did not work out as we had originally thought. So because that 3A plant is actually downstream of the OSO plant, we looked at our OSO facility that we currently have and realized that we could achieve the same results by moving upstream. So if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. And you'll notice the 3 bulleted items is what we were planning on doing at the 3A plant is expand and or replace tertiary filters, expand and or replace the disinfection process, and expand or upgrade the effluent pumps. And the same 3 functions we will be performing at the Oso Creek plant, which there's some pictures that show there, with an interesting dilemma that came before us. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. The current facilities, and this is an aerial photo of the facilities. It was, as I mentioned earlier, constructed in about 1976 or 75 thereabouts. And the capacity is limited to about 1.8 million gallons. At the time, it was relatively state of the art, but that state has changed dramatically, as I think everyone realizes. And because of it, we can get better treatment if we were able to switch this out. Plus, it's starting to get towards the end of its useful life. Some of the facilities are 45 years old, plus or minus. So you're starting to get to the end. The filtration technology is such that it's a dual media filters. It's a little bit lower capacity that we're able to put through there. And you're relying on going through sand filters, and some of the vagaries that can take place using that technology doesn't always result in the highest level of treatment. So we wanted to change that out. The facility right now has chlorination for disinfection, and that type of process takes a lot of area. So that was one of the other things that we considered as we were looking at this current facility. Interestingly enough, as time has worn on, the city of Mission Viejo has, for a number of years, been sharing the space. So the building with the red roof that you see on the right of the picture, the administration building, used to be just for district uses. We had both our plant operations in there. It used to be our operations center for the entire district, as well as the boardroom. But that has changed, and the vast majority of the square footage in there is now being used by City of Mission Viejo staff for their field activities that they take, as well as the warehousing space, which is in the building with the large white L-shaped roof. And most of that building is utilized for storage of outdoor equipment that the city uses, some of their outdoor decorations, banners, and things of that nature that the city needs storage for, as well as some of the outdoor area. One problem with this site, though, you can see it's relatively constrained, because what you see on the graphic is pretty much the property boundaries, and that meaning not even the bottom portion of that, but about where the asphalt driveway is and just a little below it. So it's a little bit of a constrained site. Next slide, please. So we saw this as a great potential opportunity, and at the same time, we talked to the city and said, and they had been talking to us, that they had a large master plan conceptual idea for what they're calling the civic core. And the intention that the city wants to do is connect the city hall and the city library, which are down in the lower left, actually underneath the north arrow and the scale of this. That's where those facilities are. And then they also have across, so on the upper left that you can't even see in the picture, community center, some recreational areas, athletic fields. And they were looking at this older shopping center area. If you're familiar with it, there was a Michael's there, the bowling alley's there, Trader Joe's is in this shopping center, and a couple of other businesses. And they really wanted to update it because this was the original shopping center that was in the city, I believe. And it's starting to show its age a bit, maybe not quite as attractive as some of their areas. So to increase the flow through the area, they're thinking that, gosh, why don't we create somewhat of a Riverwalk type facility potentially? Flip those businesses around, at least ones that would support restaurants and other businesses of that nature that would then face the creek. And then, gee, what else can we do with this? How can we make this with more public space? So they came to us and said, we'd like to be able to utilize some of that side of the creek, being the east side where the treatment plant is, to incorporate into this civic core, because they also wanted to be able to extend where the public has access along the creek, all the way from Marguerite Parkway, basically up to the dam for Lake Mission Viejo. One big chunk was where the plant is because it's restricted access. So we went and talked about a few things, and it looked like we could do some co-locating at that facility. So we started some early planning on it. And if you wouldn't mind hitting the forward button. It's not a new slide, but I unfortunately used animation. I didn't learn from Jenna either. But with this, we realized, hey, we need more capacity, but more capacity on a site that was already somewhat constrained meant that we had to potentially change the type of treatment process that we're using. In addition to that, we can read the tea leaves, and regulations are not getting lighter. They're getting more restrictive on the use of recycled water and some of the impacts that it may have as far as for irrigation and such. So we're also planning for nutrient removal, most notably nitrates and phosphorus, because of what that can do to encourage growth within the creeks and waterways running down towards the ocean, is to reduce those so it doesn't try to foster or increase the amount of growth that may take place in those creeks. And we also saw an opportunity to treat some of the urban runoff that right now that we capture, but we aren't treating. So that was some of the things that we were looking at. Next slide, please. With that, and as I mentioned, we had to look at an alternative treatment process because there's a variety out there that you can treat the same amount of flow in a much smaller footprint. And those that aren't into this on a daily basis, MBRs, membrane bioreactors, are well known right now as far as being able to highly concentrate treatment. You can usually do twice as much flow in the same area. And we were also looking at another process that's relatively new and is being used in Europe at a number of facilities and a couple here in the United States, and that's the aerobic granular sludge. We really wanted to look at that process because of the lower energy requirements that it has. So that is one of the things that's taken some time because we wanted to pilot test it. We talked to the vendors quite a bit. You talk to some of the other operators, and gosh, it's really great and things of that nature. But I think all of us that have done construction projects in the past, it's not exactly the same when you're going to do it. So we wanted to try it on our flows at our plant to see how that went. So we signed up to do that. Unfortunately, right before COVID is when the contracts get signed. It's supposed to be a 3 to 4 month process, and then all of a sudden they couldn't travel. So we got put on hold for a good 8 months to be able to get that pilot testing going and completed. But from that, we were able to determine what kind of water quality was going to come off the process, anything that our operators would have to be concerned about as far as being able to operate the plant and get that water quality, and also the energy consumption to confirm our calculations and assumptions that we had made. So the graphs on the bottom, those are reflective of some of the testing that we did: total nitrites, total nitrates, phosphorus, total suspended solids, a variety of other constituents to see, well, just how good was that process working. And then from that, we could also project out what ancillary equipment would be required as far as filtration and then screening coming into it. Because that gets back to that filtration portion that we need to get squared away to meet what we're trying to do as far as the expanded tertiary capacity and what we're doing with the grant. Next slide, please. So through all of that, we actually determined that it was going to be most advantageous for the district to use the MBR process. You use a higher mixed liquor concentration, and that's not liquor like you normally associate it to. That's actually a much thicker sludge, activated solids biology process is what mixed liquor is. And because you can run that at a higher concentration, you don't need near as much storage or volume in your tanks. So it's a little cheaper to construct for the larger capacities that you need. As I mentioned earlier, we're able to double the site capacity within the Osa Creek plant, which allows us to do those projects and the considerations with the city of Mission Viejo. And the other nice thing with the MBR, it is a very small membrane. It's not as small as reverse osmosis, but it does have very fine pore size, which means the water quality coming off the MBR process, while not drinking water, might as well be as far as clarity of the water that's coming off. And so we know that that was going to improve for our recycled water users. We're looking at, and we're still making the final determination on the disinfection is to get away from chlorine because of the size requirements for it, and use a process referred to as pasteurization, which is just like with milk. You heat it up to a certain temperature for a specified time period. That kills all the viruses and bacteria, just as if you were using chlorine, and then you put it back into your system. If we use the pasteurization process, we will install gas engines that go with that. That would be cogeneration, so we can generate the power for the plant while generating the heated water that we would need to provide that pasteurization. The other thing that we're comparing against is UV disinfection, which is a known entity. It's more energy intensive. We will add chlorine at the end because we want to make sure that our distribution system is going to keep any kind of regrowth that may take place, and we don't get algae in some of the pipelines or in the small emitters that you might have on your sprinkler heads, and then take that to effluent pumping and put it in our distribution system. If you could forward, please. So secondarily, as I mentioned, at the plant, with that smaller footprint, we're also able to ultimately provide even better treatment for the barrier water than just putting it through this treatment plant, is build a microfiltration reverse osmosis facility similar to the one that we constructed for Lake Mission Viejo. And the Oso Creek barrier water, which some of you may or may not know, we intercept all the urban runoff that comes in the Oso Creek watershed down in the golf course, just to the right as you're going towards the freeway, where Oso crosses over the creek there, Oso Parkway, and we intercept that flow and we send it back and put it in our distribution system. The intent is that we're going to treat it, reduce the TDS that's in there, reduce the contaminants that are in there, again, to improve the water quality and clean it up a little bit further as far as the barrier treatment. Combine that in the effluent pumping, and then that can go out into our distribution system. Next slide, please. This is an aerial that you'd seen earlier, but with the black lines, we have superimposed what the layout is of the new facility. So as you can see, it actually is going to take a shade less square footage than the original plant, but provide significantly better and greater volume of treatment. So won't bore you with all the details as far as the treatment process, but one of the things that's we feel kind of innovative use of the site, the office building is the one off to the right. And the district is going to use the left portion that's at an angle on this drawing. Downstairs will be the warehouse facilities, double doors, and I got a better picture of what this is going to look like, but to explain aerially from what it would be. And then the city's warehouse would be that larger building to the right. You'll notice that there's now a road that's going to come across at the bottom of that graphic that's going to go up to a parking lot. And the offices that were down below before are actually going to be built on the second floor. The parking lot will be at the second floor elevation. And for architectural term, it's going to be a walkout to where you could walk straight in there, no stairs. You're on the second floor, you're in your office, and be able to utilize that space for those functions. There will be a stair and elevator, freight elevator, to be able to move back and forth if you wanted to. And our operations staff will be on the second floor of the warehouse building that's on the left and be able to perform the functions they need to, that they typically do. So it's kind of, we think, a unique and efficient use of the space that's available out there. And with that, we're going to be able to provide 3.3 million gallons of tertiary treatment and an additional 1.0 million gallons of urban runoff treatment for that Oso barrier. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we've been working with the city, and this is some renderings that their architect has been putting together on how we envision this whole thing blending as far as that goes. So this would be somewhat elevated from an aerial point of view from the southwest looking at that facility. So one thing that we have added is this building that you see in the foreground on the end of those two bridges is a building that the district will construct. It's for education. It will allow district to have meetings and group meetings in there. It can hold upwards of about 200 to 250 people. We will be able to have all employee meetings there because as the district's grown, we've grown out of places that we can all get together, and this would be a location that we can do this. And then interesting, the city had asked that if they could utilize this facility as well. So ultimately, We foresee that there would be public events that could be held within this venue or small scale concerts, performances of that nature. The bridges are coming across from that Civic Core Riverwalk themed shopping area and provide that access for bicycles and things of that nature. So next slide, please. This will be moving to the north and looking straight across. So we feel like it's been a pretty good way to camouflage the fact that you actually have a wastewater treatment plant, water reclamation plant, combined with these public facilities. So our facility, while using the same theme architecturally, we would just put skin on some of our building that would match the building designs of what the city is trying to tie together between this side of the creek and our side. So this gives that. Next slide, please. An aerial view of it, the office building upper left. The treatment is that white, and then there'll be all covered tanks to prevent any odors from being released at the facility. The grayish building is where the UV disinfection, or I'm sorry, that's where the MBRs are tucked in there. And then the building to the right is where our effluent pump station and disinfection would be located. The OSA barrier treatment building is the building in the foreground right in the middle. That venue that was across from those two buildings, or two bridges, I should say, is on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. And again, this takes us back to the venue from the other direction and kind of gives you an overview of what it looks like and what we're looking at as far as theme. But granted, it is an animation or kind of a cartoon here. It is what we see with the public being able to utilize the space both as a pedestrian and also on bicycles. Could then go, as I mentioned, from Marguerite all the way up to the dam at Lake Mission Viejo. Next slide, please. So the schedule, we're greatly accelerating so we can meet hopefully the extended timeframes that we're being allowed on this. We are in the final throes of the CEQA documentation, which we plan on bringing to our board in July, and hopefully that we're able to get those documents approved. We're finalizing the pump station right now because the first phase, we have to move that effluent pump station because that has to be operational throughout the construction, because that pump station not only takes OSA water and pumps it up into our system into the upper OSA reservoir, it also takes Molten Miguel's water that in the winter, when they have excess flows from the regional plant, it's sent through pipes to that pump station and on up. And in the summertime, when the 3A plant is being operated full time, it acts as also, it can pump there and we can pump the reservoir and then flow back down into Molten Miguel. So we can't impede their operation. So we're designing that and then plan on the construction to start, hopefully again with the CEQA document being approved in July. So as soon as the CEQA document is, we plan on demolishing the plant and then starting the construction. We're working on the plans right now and should be far enough along to be able to have concrete going. Hopefully in the August, September timeframe, we can start pouring the base of some of the tankage. The OSA barrier treatment plant, it's a lot quicker construction. And based on the experience that we had from Lake Mission Viejo, anticipate starting actually in the field in March. The work, the behind the scenes stuff will all be done. And that's more of a, I always liken it to more of a Lego type thing where you get the parts delivered and you just have to put them together. There's not much concrete in site work. And looking for a facility startup in the beginning of December next year. And that is the sum total of the presentation. I'd be more than happy to try to address any questions.
Thank you so much. This is fantastic. I have a couple questions, but I had a note from Sandra that she wanted to add a couple of notes before we go to questions. Sandra?
Thank you so much, Chair Neves. Sandra Jacobs, Santa Margarita Water District. Thank you, Don, our Assistant General Manager from our water district, for that presentation. That was a lot of technical information, but important in stressing our use of recycled water, not just from treating sewage, but from urban runoff capture and treatment, which the counties and cities are so involved with. So what we're doing at OSO, is an excellent opportunity here to really show how we're trying to capture some of those urban flows, recycle what we can so that we're not using potable water during a drought to irrigate our landscaping, our parks, our common areas. And it's a great project. And if anybody has any questions about it or would like to be invited to the groundbreaking when we get there, assuming we can be there with masks on, just let us know and we'll make sure everyone's a part of it, because it is definitely a city, county, and water district group effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Don. And I absolutely want an invite. I think this is so exciting. Don, I had a question. I am really particularly excited about the ozone barrier treatment, and I think that is an amazing example. And I was curious, what is the TDS of that of those flows?
The ozone barrier right now, it's gosh, I don't want to get myself in too much trouble, but it can be upwards of 2,200, somewhere between 1,500 and 2,200.
Wow.
And our recycled water is significantly lower than that. We're typically in the 750, 850 range when we're getting pure Colorado River after extended periods of dry.
Mm-hmm.
So as you can see, that would tend to degrade that water quality. And because of some of the issues that we're looking at as far as what the regional board may come down with new regulations as far as water quality, we think that this is just the right step. No one has said that we have to do this, but we're taking it upon ourselves, and it improves the water quality. And then we do have other projects that we're working on, and we're kind of really jazzed up about. One of them is another stormwater infiltration capture in San Juan watershed, which if you ever want a presentation on that, we'd be more than happy to share it. But we also are looking at recycled water infiltration using those same basins so that we don't have dirt just laying fallow 9/10 of the year. So with that, we want to make sure our recycled water has a very high quality so that we're not creating a problem ourselves downstream. So it's self-serving in that regard.
Absolutely. Thank you, Don. Well, we do have a few hands raised. I could talk all afternoon about this, but I will let some other people have the floor. I see Carol Moore. Carol, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, I can only unmute one place. Thank you. I had a quick questions, and one of them had to do, when you were comparing the two, you were comparing the anaerobic and the membrane, and one you could use a smaller footprint, the other one, but then you had the difference of higher energy. Is that what finally did it, or how close was the energy? I guess I was just kind of curious.
No. Good question. And for want of being too techie, and I apologize because I could go heavy nerd if you wanted to, but the energy on the AGS system is significantly lower than MBR, and that wasn't the trade-off. We found that it was not providing quite as consistent water quality on the suspended solids that were coming off of it. It has seemed to be extremely good at phosphorus removal, relatively good with nitrate removal, not quite as good on the dependability on suspended solids. And from our operations standpoint, we were a bit concerned that if we ever had plant upsets, because of the nature of that system, it takes a little while for the biology to recover. And we didn't want the plant to be down. And while you can still treat, it wouldn't necessarily want to be able to use it in your recycled system. So we could meet secondary effluent requirements and be able to take it to the ocean. But we opted to be able to have that dependability, reliability that the MBRs provide, plus the filtration capabilities of the MBR was so much greater. So we did sacrifice, unfortunately, that it does use more energy on the MBR, but we felt for the district's various considerations and how we weighted those considerations, that was more advantageous for us.
It sounds like it was substantially better then. Thank you. That was what.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, I will recognize Roger Boutreau. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, 5 by 5. Don, thank you for the presentation. Don, as you know, and the district, I know staff knows, I actually was given a tour of this in the conceptual phase. That's got to be 7 years ago. Glad to see it on the verge, on the precipice of fruition. And gee, Don, actually, you are a heavy nerd. So thank you, because many times, for those of you that don't know, if I've got a really good, tricky question, Don's the one that I badger to get the answers I want. I think that this project is fantastic, just like the Gubernadora Basin, the Trampas Reservoir. What this district does truly is innovative. And I think one of the most outstanding things about Santa Margarita is their ability to be flexible. As I discussed at the San Juan Coffee Chat a week or two ago, Don, you know, if you guys can't do plan A, then you got a plan B and plan C. And I think that's what happens when you have an outstanding engineering staff, as Margarita does. And once again, I've seen this project and I've been asking you a bunch of questions. And once again, to repeat the offer for those who are still in the meeting, under certain circumstances and conditions, Clean Water Now, the group that I represent, I'm the executive director and founder. We do write letters of support. We will be writing a letter of support. I know this requires, I think, an extension with one of the state agencies, is that the Department of Water Resources, I believe. But we will heavily support that enthusiastically. I just have one last question, Don, and I bet you already know what I'm going to ask, but I'll ask it anyway. I hope those roofs are being considered for solar, because reduce the carbon footprint. I appreciate that pasteurization process over UV, and I think that's another way to reduce your footprint. And I would strongly encourage you to use all of those surfaces that you can. That's an area that's fairly open. I know it very well. I've obviously been there and toured the site, and I would encourage you to do solar. I think you could at least run some of the ancillary equipment, you know, night lights, interior lights for emergency operations. You know that you know the drill, right, Don? So I would encourage you, hopefully, to integrate some of that. I think anytime you can throw in some green into your palette, as they say, that makes the project more advantageous. So I look forward to you getting back to me with some little bit more documentation so that I can create that letter of support. But this is a project that Clean Water Now can believe in. We see a lot of projects that are really just basically green wrapping paper. This is a project that is multi-beneficial, which is a great way to describe Santa Margarita Water District. They aren't just beneficial for their customers, they're beneficial for the environment. And I think that, once again, we strongly support this and we look forward. And by the way, Director Jacobs, Sandra, I don't think we'll be wearing masks by the time we break ground out there. So I'll look forward to seeing you at that groundbreaking. Thank you.
Well, I'll end. Thanks for your comment, Roger. We are considering, we just didn't show it as far as the solar on the roofs. You may or may not be aware, the district is a big user of solar power. We put in a 0.5 megawatt here at our office building.
Yes, very much aware.
We put in a megawatt at our Chiquita plant, as well as we produce 120 kilowatts off of our digester gas through gas generators on that. So yes, we're constantly trying to look to reduce that carbon footprint, not just because it helps score points on grant applications, but because we actually believe in it and it keeps our power costs down. So we are trying to do that. And I will warn you, you may not have to wear masks, but you will be wearing a hard hat if you're coming.
I've already got one. Thank you guys for donating a Santa Margarita hard hat. Thanks, Don.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. And Mike Beenan, I see your hand is raised. I'm not sure if it was from before or if you would also like to speak. I think it might be from before.
Debbie?
Okay. Yes.
Mike added a comment in the comments.
Oh.
He said,
okay.
Hi, Don, great presentation. Many thanks. Have you considered biogas and fuel cells as well as solar roofs for on-site energy?
Okay, so I think that has been answered. Okay. Thank you. Okay, and thank you, Don. And we're really kind of pushing that timetable. So I again thank you, Don. This was a fabulous presentation. Always highlights to see, you know, some of these projects that have received grants. This is really fantastic. So we'll move very quickly to item number 7. And I'm sorry, to the executive officer's report. Amanda, I know that you have some great updates for us.
Well, thank you so much. And actually, just to be respectful of time and to allow our executive committee members time for their comments, I really will just refer folks to the written report that was in the staff report. with two small additions. I can formalize that the DWR has, we have received concurrence from DWR on our submittal, our updated OC Stormwater Resources Plan, or OC SWRP, which we noted in the written report that we would be receiving approval by today. And I can confidently say we have received approval from DWR on that updated plan. And then also just wanted to make a note, we are currently scheduling orientations for our new executive committee members. We're reaching out and scheduling those individually. If you have not been contacted and would like to have an orientation meeting with myself and our staff, please contact Maria Tamez, but my understanding is we're well underway in getting those meetings scheduled. And with that, I will just refer folks to the written information in my executive officer's report, which really just kind of gives an update on where we are with some DWR projects, as well as some new information out from Roundtable of Regions that we're currently working with the management committee on.
Thank you, Amanda. Yes. Okay. Yes, it was a great report, by the way. Okay, that's fantastic. I will move now to any of the executive committee members. If you have any comments or any questions for staff, if you'll raise your hand now, I will recognize you. Let me go through our very long list. Everyone's very quiet this afternoon. Okay. Oh, I see Sandra Jacobs has raised her hand. Sandra?
Thank you. Amanda, in Sandra Jacobs, Santa Margarita Water District, in March, we talked a little bit about, in your report, some of the coordination going on with the state agencies like Fish and Wildlife and the regional board in the types of mitigation that they're requiring for some of these projects that, like Don was pointing out, really help everybody in the watershed to some extent. Has there been any further discussion on trying to streamline some of these requirements? Fish and Wildlife, for example, are putting on projects like the San Juan Basin project that make it, in some cases, perhaps too expensive to build. Anything new on that?
Nothing new on that, but that is definitely something that, going back to our earlier presentation on the work that was done with the Aliso Creek Watershed Project Planning Group, and obviously something that we would look to carry over into the work that we do with San Juan is bringing those agencies to the table with project proponents and member agencies to kind of discuss that. We have been talking with them conceptually over the last, over the Aliso Creek process on looking at streamlining permitting for a collection of projects if they were in, similar geographic proximity as well as with timing. So those are connections that we have made, but we have not had, since March, we have not had any additional discussions.
Okay, thank you, Chair Neves. That's all I had at this point. Thank you for a great meeting.
Okay, and is there anyone, let me just double check, make sure anyone else, if you have any more comments. I don't see anything else, and it looks like we are going to be able to adjourn on time. So I thank you all for this opportunity of being your chair the last 2 years, and we will welcome for our next meeting, which will be August 5th, Chair Tiffany Ackley. So congratulations to Tiffany and to Kay, and we are adjourned. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Would we put together, would you, or would it be Kay that would put together the visioning committee?
You know, I think,
'Cause it wasn't on the agenda, so it would have to
Right.
be agendized.
yes, I think that should probably be agendized for the next meeting. That's true. Okay. So I will work with Tiffany and with Kay before July 1st in order to get them on board and up to speed, and we'll talk about that. And
Is that all right, Amanda?
Is that all right with you, Amanda?
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, we would be happy to bring it as an item, and it would need to come before the committee. So, yeah.
Of course. Okay. Okay, great. So